There are only 4 races until the end of the regular season, and then the championship hunt gets serious in hunt of the Full Throttle Cup here in 2023. And tonight it is the Pocono Raceway who plays host to this Monday night action. And as always, we're happy that you're spending your time with us here on RaceSpotTV. Our producer downstairs is Joshua Lee alongside Nolan Rempel. My name is Evan Pocono, and Nolan, it is crunch time, and man, is this a tricky track, no pun intended, as we head to the Tricky Triangle. It is so unique, it is so unlike anything else we have on the calendar, and it comes at such a pivotal point in the season. And there's a lot of drivers who really need to start getting some race wins, other drivers who need a points race their way in, everybody in the field in a very different scenario compared to one another, and I think we're going to see some really strategic racing depending on all those different scenarios.
It's a track that definitely demands that you definitely are able to put yourself up there on the strategic game. It is, of course, home to the longest straight on any NASCAR oval that we have on the calendar, with that massive long front straightaway. Each one of its turns is a little bit different from the others in both radius and banking. Turn 1 up to 14 degrees. The tunnel turn only at 8. Turn 3 down to 6, virtually flat in comparison to turn number 1. The speeds can differ so heavily around this racetrack, and the long pond straight, no doubt, going to be a big talking point over the course of the night to see if drivers can set themselves with that ever important run up towards a critical turn number 2.
This racetrack clocking in at 2.5 miles in length, same to that of the Daytona International Speedway. Of course, you talk about those 3 unique corners, all designed after other famous tracks through the years, makes this such a unique racetrack. And listen, did we go to a lot of those intermediate speedways? Did we call them tri-ovals? Well, this is literally a tri-oval, 3 corners only to get around this Pocono Raceway, and it is a long, fast challenge. A racetrack that is historically known to not be one that, you get in and out of pretty quickly. We've seen some battles of attrition. This track will wear you down. And again, all of this in the important context of where we sit in the championship. Here's a look at your playoff standings with 4 races left to go in the regular season. The multi-time race winners, even at this point, those individual race winners, assuming that they keep the participation up, are fine. Agno Phillip, 3-time race winner to the big story. Matt Danson, a 2-timer. We've seen a lot of Kevin King in the last couple of weeks, but again, a part-time schedule means that he is not on this list. So where I look, Nolan, to the right-hand side and on that red cut line, within striking distance, I say Papanow, Widemaster, Wetmore, I think, with a decent chance of being able to fight their way in on points, really chasing only Steve Tucker, Federer Place, Nieto, Burke. They would have to have a mammoth fall-off to find themselves down there. But again, anybody else on that board, Pooler, Dunkelberger, Pancari, Light Major, can all find themselves in the blink of an eye if they can get a race win.
And while, yes, they do have to get themselves a race win, it means it's going to be a big challenge for them to rise to that occasion and take that one critical win in these last 4 races of the regular series season. I think if you want to points your way in, even Widemaster Wetmore, it's going to be a bit of an ask. It's been a very consistent season in terms of our driver turnout. Steve Tucker, Brandon Federplace have all been drivers that have not shown that they have been willing to miss too many, if any, races at all this season. Eric Papanow, of course, has also been a very regular attender week in, week out. I think Papanow at this point has a realistic chance still of making his way in. That is going to quickly fade, though, with every week that passes by, that he remains underneath that cut line.
He's going to have to figure something out and figure it out soon, because this series quickly coming to a close. We take a live look in at the qualifying right now. 2-lap single car runs in this 5-minute session. Kevin King, last week's race winner, on track right now. 2-time race winner, not only just 7 days ago at New Hampshire, but a couple of weeks ago on the streets of Chicago as well. But again, a part-time schedule for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series Pro, meaning that he is not eligible to knock off some of those top names on the playoff grid that we had just looked at prior. Early times clocking in. Burke, Harris, Freenach, fast. A couple other drivers were looking good, dropping down the leaderboard a little bit. Freenach now to P5 as Johnson goes to the top of the board with about 60 seconds left in qualifying. 33 cars attempting to qualify for this Pocono 200, so the good news is they'll all make the show.
Every driver looking to make the show, which means if you want to qualify down for the tail of the field, you have no worries in doing so and not being able to make it in. But of course, I would still recommend these drivers get themselves sorted whenever they can and get themselves up onto the qualifying sheets, because passing a Pocono is far from easy. You have to really set yourself up lap after lap after lap. It is not an easy challenge. As it stands, it looks like our grid is pretty much set. Potentially only Kevin King having enough time to get himself around. Landon Mills still on his outlap.
Still on his outlap. Kevin King is indeed on his second lap, but is he going to get to the start-finish line in time? As clock ticks down, Kevin King will come through turn number 3. First lap of 53.725. It's fifth currently. Second lap. Can he improve? He'll go not in time. The time just dropped, and it will count.
Wow.
At the buzzer, a 53.595. It was so late that the leaderboard didn't have a time to update before the session switched over. But with maybe thousands of seconds to spare, Kevin King will indeed snatch away the pole position. As we go trackside and take a look at your Get Wet Sports starting grid, he did it 2/100ths of a second over Michael Johnson, who will start in P2. Burke, Harris, that's a lot of big names on row 2, and a couple of championship favorites at Agnew, Phillip, and Andrew Freenosh will roll from P5 and P6.
7th place is going to be Tom Wetmore in the Roadhouse Esports number 51. Brandon Fetterplay is going to be down in the Bowie Esports number 34. Steve Tucker for Aerospeed Racing going to be in the number 9 spot, with Chris Treppa out of Michigan going to be rounding out the top 10 in the first third of this field. Kyle Trudell for XPM going to be in 11th as always, and Nicholas Marr from Marr Motorsports, that ever distinguishable green and orange car, going to be down in 12th.
Michael Araya gets lucky number 13 tonight, and Ryan Dunkelberger alongside 8 to 14th. Thomas George will start 15th, Jaron Windmaster in 16th, Andrew Phipps in 17th, and Ross Cato in 18th.
19th place going to hold Carl Pooler with Grant Davis beside him to round out the top 20. Sammy Young and Alexander Light on row 11, with Sean Cass and Richard Wilsifer on row 12.
Richard Woodruff and Sean Kalis going to share row 13. Benazzi Major and Brett Punkari on the row behind. And then Eric Papadow and Mike Kaczynski round out your top 30.
Landon Mills going to be down at the 31st spot. He's the first driver to not put down a qualifying lap. He'll join the likes of Eric Stanford and Brian Dixon for a 33-car field. That's
a look top to bottom at your Get Wet Sports starting grid. GetWetSports.com is the world's first digital content library that showcases and celebrates creators of all sizes and backgrounds, including iRacing, military gamers, and women in gaming. Getting listed is free. Find out more at GetWetSports.com and start on your content creation journey today. Well, pole position has not been the favorite so far this season in this Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series, but there has been, to this point in the year, I think only 2 times that the pole sitters won, and that includes Kevin King from last week at New Hampshire. As we mentioned, he is on a part-time schedule, not competing for the championship, but he is certainly competing for checkered flags week in and week out. Tonight, he'll try to go for his 3rd win in the last 4 weeks. Field rolls off for turn 3. Pace car down and in. It's Kevin King's field to control. Let's get tricky. Let's go racing at Pocono. A lot of chaos as they head down the Long Pond Straight, down the back straightaway, and off the turn number 3, I should say, headed back towards the Long Pond Straight. The longer of the two back stretches led to turn 2. They were fine there. A lot of lookers, only a couple of takers try to go 3 wide, and then it got really sloppy off the tunnel turn to turn 3. But lap number 1, we make it there. No changes inside of your top 4 as Kevin King still leads over Michael Johnson.
I think the hairiest moment was when Tom Wetmore collided with Brandon Fenderplace to the exit of that second corner. Had to have some cat-like reflexes to keep the Tube Tech Chevrolet underneath him. But now Wetmore has slot himself in with the number 16 spot, so you won't lose too much time able to get back going and see if he can punch his way back towards the top 10. You see Trepa down on the bottom side, made his first start in RSR competition here a couple weeks ago, and now looking to see if he can't hang it on the inside of Nicholas Mara, but Mara going to rip to the high side. And the National Multiple Sclerosis Society number 40 Chevrolet gonna power by. He'll look to take over the number 8 spot.
It's an impressive start for Nicholas Morris. Started 12th. He's up to P7. He's the biggest mover in the Northern Hemisphere of that running order, as the only driver who's made up more spots down towards the bottom. Landon Mills didn't take a time in the queue. He started 31st. He's up to P20, making some noise of his own as the field cycles off of the steepest of the corners here. Turn number 1. And the second longest of the straights is the run down to the tunnel turn, which over the weekend seemed to be the trouble spot in the NASCAR Cup Series race. Look how tight those top 3 are. King, Johnson, Burke, Tossa, blanket over top of the right now. Your top 3 all separated by less than 0.2 of a second. Bit of a wide entry to turn 3, though, for Bradley Burke. It's going to drop him off the bumper, but it's going to give him a huge run. Here he goes. Does not make the move, though. Instead, puts the bumper to Johnson. He'll push to 39. Does Johnson go for the race lead? He'll also decide to stay in line. Nobody gets the move yet. Kevin King still stays P1.
Good fights going on all the way up and down throughout this field. Michael Johnson still keeping things tucked right in behind Kevin King. You have to wonder if potentially he's just looking to save his stuff up here, make sure he can actually be in a position to fight at the end, figure out where are Kevin King's weaknesses. The long straights of this track and the aerodynamic nature of these cars means that King's not going to be able to break away too much unless Michael Johnson has some sort of major error. And with him being pushed by Bradley Burke, that's not going to be looking to come around anytime soon. And Phillip will look to the inside of Bradley Burke. Burke taking a very wide line on the entry to turn 3, but able to get himself diamond off on the exit. He's got to run on the top 2.
Runs are pretty intense here, even with the lack of banking at turn number 3 there. Burke's been able to get a huge run every time, but he doesn't want to be the one to make the move every time. He goes to the bumper of Johnson almost as if to egg the 39 Ford on to make him do his dirty work. Kevin King has got these cars all over the bumper. Now we're going to see some action here. Agnew Phillip on 4th position was going to go to the inside of Burke, and Burke said, all right, that's enough of that. Blocked the 94, went to the inside of the 39 of Johnson, and he will clear in the tunnel. Johnson a little bit loose that time. Phillip still looking, trying to get low. No run there. Harris. Then the 20 of Freenash, all close as well. But it is the 95 of Bradley Burke to 2nd. Now let's see what the Get Wet Sports Chevrolet can do. He's got the run off of turn 3.
That was masterfully judged by Burke there on the Long Pond straightaway to recognize that move was coming and use it to his advantage to make that move on Michael Johnson. Now he's going to give the bumper to the back of Kevin King. You saw Johnson look for the low side, opted against it, but now he's going to be copying Bradley Burke's wide entry, tight exit philosophy, although Johnson tracks up a bit more than I think he might have liked on the exit of turn number 1. Here we go for the race lead down the back straightaway. Bradley Burke to the inside of Kevin King, looking for the first lead change on the night.
And they will go side by side off to the tunnel turn as King does it back out, and behind them they'll go at it for 3rd as well as Agnew Phillip back to the inside of Michael Johnson for the lead. King clear of the 95 of Burke. He had the better run down the north straight. He'll defend for the moment, but the 95 is so good. Exit of 3, and he'll look right back down to the bottom, but he's not going to get any drafting help here. Johnson and Phillip both go high, and they're going to give a whale of a shot to King that's going to drop Burke from fighting for the race lead to struggling to hang on to P3.
The racing has been absolutely phenomenal here so far tonight. And we're not even 10 laps in, but already we've been seeing these guys showing they are not afraid to make some bull moves. And it's going to give us one heck of a show from the start of this race all the way through down to the checkered flag. As is our tradition to mention that at least once throughout the course of the first 10 laps, and they'll always end up ringing true. Kevin King still looks to hang on to the race lead down to turn number 3. He'll do so. Phillip runs third, Johnson in second. Bradley Burke has fallen outside of the podium to fourth.
He's dropped down a little bit to -1 from where he started, although Burke has been the antagonist in much of this. As you take a look again at the race information, 80 laps, fixed setups, no fast repairs, 4 tire sets available, and maximum fuel capacity with a maximum of 3 attempts at an overtime restart. Seems like most times we get that, more times than we don't. Phillip maybe a little bit tight that time off of turn number 1, had to lift out for the gas a little bit, nearly got into the fence, but he didn't have Denny Hamlin underneath him, so he was fine, and he'll be able to stay third. Thought maybe we were going to see a challenge from Harris. That doesn't come, and now it is Phillip pushing that 39 of Johnson aggressively off of turn 2, as behind them, Chris Treppa in the 50 car going to go to the inside of Burke. That battle for P5 and 6 as the race leaders do battle again.
Cody Harris going to work his way to the number 4 spot as Burke ends up falling to 5th. You've got almost a 5-car tandem down the front straightaway. It was at least 3 for a hot minute there between the top 3. And all the while, you've got drivers like Chris Treppa that have worked their way back into the fray as well. You see Nicholas Morrow looking to make a move here, potentially on Andrew Freenach a bit deeper in the field as well. And before Morrow can make that move, Dunkelberger going to end up having to look to the inside as well, but he's going to back out and tuck back in line. I find this very, very interesting here, Evan. It's a case of everybody wants to be up there with the leaders. Nobody wants to be leading this race, though. It almost looks like one of the Formula E races we've had over the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, we saw Burke make the move, try to get to the inside, and it just kind of stalled out there, right? I mean, I think it's certainly easier to make a pass for second or third or fourth or 34th, just to give you the fact that, again, you've got the draft. When you get up front, you just get the wall of air. So it's a bit of both, right? I don't know if anybody, A, wants to be leading, but also B, wants to try to make a move for the race lead, because look how that worked out for Bradley Burke, right? It involved getting out of line, losing draft support, and he went from almost taking over the race lead to 5th. Now, 5th ain't bad, but not what the 95 wants to be in. So I think maybe that's a little bit of both of it. The top, I'd say 6 or 7 or so single filed out. First car to the inside back there, the 44 Lariah. He was actually 12th at the stripe, just making a move to the inside of the 34 of Fetter Place for P10. So the midfield's got some action, and up front does as well, as Harris now back down to the inside of the 39 of Johnson, who slides backwards.
Phillip made that look for the second position down towards the tunnel turn, and now trying to set up Kevin King for a pass of the race lead while they're side by side for the last podium spot just behind. Bradley Burke flying up at the head of steam. He's going to look to give some assistance to Cody Harris to help him maintain that run on the bottom side. Michael Johnson now at potential risk here of losing the top 5. He stays trapped on that outside lane for too much longer, but it looks like the outside started to come into its own. It's always been there for turn 2. You're able to run that high lane a lot more reliably on that second corner, but as you see Treppa working to the outside of Cody Harris, it still is more the inside for offense in 1 and 2. That's not to say, though, you can't get some almighty runs off of that opening corner still. Turn 3, a bit more of a challenge, but still doable with a flatter banking.
There's been so many near moments of contact. Impressed that we've made it through the first 10 laps of this race. Again, this is a long racetrack, 2.5 miles in length, and your average speed is not what it is at the other 2.5 mile track on the calendar at Daytona International Speedway. So you're talking about lap times just a couple seconds under a minute in length. This is an 80-lap race. This is not a short one. So these drivers, I think, also need to keep it in mind to maybe pace themselves a little bit. Don't take each other out, tear up your equipment, eat away at those tires so early in a run. But these cars are sporty with this package. It's Kind of hard to resist the temptation, and here's another challenge for the lead. Phillip to the inside of Kevin King, and this time the 29 doesn't stick it on the outside. He'll lift. He allows Phillip to go through. I think King was trying to set him up for a crossover off of 2. I don't think he was simply letting the 94 go, because he got the run off of 2, but it was not enough. And for the first time tonight, a new race leader will lead the field off of turn 3 to end lap 12. It's Agno Phillip, as at least one of our cars back there caught the fence. Now 2 of them into the outside wall off of 3.
Bit of scrambling right at the tail end of the field with those couple of hits into the outside wall, but able to get themselves sorted. Richard Woodruff was one of the cars that went hard into the outside wall. Not quite the outside wall. He just kept it off. He was tagged by Manati Major. He had a huge moment, though, where he had to keep it off the wall. It was a good save, though, from the number 27 car, and a very lucky skip. But that caution flag is out as we've got a crash off of turn number 1.
Trouble on turn 1. Sean Kalist is up against the inside wall. There is the SK Sim Racing entry, tail end of it. As he was way back in 31st position. Good news is the car doesn't look torn up, so I don't know if he actually hit anything or got hit by anything. Let's see. Just started to lose the back end. It snapped around on him, and I think it's going to be just a lazy loop around. No contact here nor there, but a trigger-happy yellow from the flag stand means we've got a yellow at lap 13. Kalist will claim responsibility.
Actually surprises me a little bit that ended up being the yellow flag. He was pretty far down on the racetrack, and I can't recall the last time I saw somebody that was that far back in the field spinning out there and it actually bringing out a yellow flag. So definitely needs your trigger finger. I know a lot of people have been, kind of criticizing certain tracks for being a bit lax when it comes to caution periods in the last couple of seasons here. I guess they may have made some updates to that one, as clearly they're on top of it here at Pocono.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right.
He goes around, and again, iRacing detecting the car spinning on the racetrack will bring out the first lengthy yellow of the day, because it takes a long time to pace these cars around the Pocono Raceway, even when the pace car is cooking at about 75 miles an hour. It does break up some exciting stuff. It'll give Agno Phillip an opportunity to enjoy the sights out front, as he had just taken the race lead away from Kevin King before the yellow came out. And now maybe a decision shy of quarter distance, but with 4 sets of tires available, does anybody want to come down and take some tires? Drivers had only seen a marginal amount of fall off, anywhere from 3 to 5 tenths of a second from their best laps of the race, but Agno Phillip get a point and shoot down pit road, and looks like they're all going to follow. Let's see what the decisions are when they head to the boxes.
So far, it is going to be everybody bar one coming to pit road. One car did elect to stay out. That is Sam Nieto, who will stay out in his Verizon Ford Mustang. Meanwhile, everybody else will hit pit road. Agno Phillip led them down. What's the strategy call going to end up being? He's up on the jack to the right side, so at least a 2-tire strategy. Absolutely no surprise there. I would assume 4 for majority of this field. And in fact, it looks like it will be 4 for majority of this field. Phillip is down off and away. He will be not the first one to lead them out. He's going to be racing Kevin King, and King just barely pipped second place back right at the pit line there. So King going to get out first, was a bit more aggressive getting out of his box.
And that is again the advantage of the number 1 pit stall. It is not as egregious of an advantage here as it is at some other racetracks, but it certainly aided the 29 of King. Something else that helped is Kevin King, 14.5 seconds in the box. Agno Phillip, 15.0. So a full half a second faster for King. That ends up, though, being the battle for third on track, because both Mike Kaczynski and Sam Nieto not coming to pit road. We will see if it was simply a play to try to steal a bonus point. Neither of them led last time by the stripe. King was the leader, or Agno, I should say, was the leader on pit road. So we'll see. Do the 2 and the 30 decide to come down pit road, or are they going to stay out there and try to roll the dice?
We'll work our way through turn number 3. We'll be able to get a good eye here on if Nieto or Kaczynski will come down. Nieto may have wanted to stay out there just to get that point for leading a lap here at the Pocono Raceway. He is going to be staying out. Kaczynski, though, will be dipping down into pit road. So he'll fall all the way to the tail end of this field now, while Sam Nieto will take his official first lap lead. He'll also elect, I think, for the outside lane on this restart. Now, you mentioned the lengthy cautions here at the Pocono Raceway, Evan, earlier on. It's worth noting, it's not the pace car speed. It is 75 miles an hour, the speed limit for the pace car here. That's not slow by any stretch of the means. I mean, back up here in Canada, at least in the region I live in, I do that on the highway, I'm speeding by about 13 miles an hour. So the pace car is ripping around here. I think all that does is go to show how fast these stock cars can actually get to, and just how huge this venue actually is.
It is a big place to get around. Good news is lights out doubled up. So we'll be getting back underway quite shortly. Yeah, 75 miles an hour. That's probably pretty slow if you're driving through Texas, and if you're, trying to get through Nashville at any time of the day when speed limit on the freeway is 55 and everyone's doing about 35, you're cooking if you're doing 75. But it is going to mean that a quick yellow, relatively speaking, means that we're going to get back underway here. The two of Nieto, the only one again to stay all the way out. He has decided to go to the outside line for the restart. So he gets his bonus point locked up. He is likely to fall back through the field. This is a big advantage, therefore, for Kevin King. With a two-car choosing the outside, though, King will be lined up on the bottom with Phillip directly behind him. The good news for the inside, obviously, is that wide front straightaway gives them plenty of opportunities to jump out of line to make moves. Maybe a little bit more limited opportunity for Ross Cato in the 12, who's going to be on the outside of row number 2. He's kind of boxed in and needs an opening to the inside to make anything happen. So we'll see if the Fast Forward Esports Ford Mustang can get out of that box. We'll see just how good Nieto can be on the old tires. And let's watch round 2 of the Kevin King at Agata Phillip heavyweight bout. Caution flag and a fall with 16 laps behind us. We are back underway, and that's a mighty good start for the two in Nieto. Is it going to be good enough for him to lead all the way to turn 1? Agata Phillip pushing Kevin King. They're going to start to build momentum. The two cars shuts the door for now. A little bit of hesitation, and here comes King now to the inside.
I'm not at all surprised that King was able to find his way to the inside, but wasn't able to properly commit due to that hesitation right at turn number 1. Nieto's not going to be able to last out there for long. I mean, yeah, only 11 lap old tires, relatively on overall pace. That is still a huge amount here at the Pocono Raceway. Nieto almost finds the wall that time by trying to keep speed up while we go 3 wide for the number 3 spot, looking down at turn number 3. There goes King. He'll steal the race lead back for the end of this first restart lap.
The two car, I think, more impressive than I thought he would be. In fact, is even going to give King a run for his money at the line. But race leader Kevin King that time by. Sam Nieto not too shabby, though, on the old tires. He's still right there. The difference is on entry. King gaps him. Oh, there's contact there now.
Oh, boy.
Trappa gets into Nieto. Nieto into the outside wall. Loses the right front fender. Rolls slowly off the corner, but the car never went around, so no yellow, we stay green.
Evidently not as much of a trigger happy figure as we first thought on the yellow flag button, as Nieto finds himself slammed hard into the outside barrier. We will keep it green, though, and this was all the old tires just coming to play. Had to slide a bit more than he would have liked. Trappa just gets it at the 2, runs him over, sends the 2 hard to the outside wall. Michael Johnson collected it, but nobody else. Single car incident. And Nieto now has a broken right front toe link as a result. He'll be forced to pit road. That's his night effectively over.
He's frustrated that he doesn't get the yellow there, because at least if there's a yellow and an opportunity to kind of slow everybody else down so he doesn't immediately get lapped and gapped so quickly, but not so fortunate there. And it's, I think you're right, effectively takes him out of contention for this race. Any hope that he wanted of having a good finish as he limps it to pit road. You're on board with Agata Phillip there, trying to get back to the bumper of Kevin King. They're about 1 second ahead of Ross Cato, who kind of quietly, Nolan, missed it on the pit strategy cycle. Took only 2 tires when he was on pit road. That's how he made the jump after starting 18th to 3rd, and probably why those top 2 can pull the gap that they have is the fact that they've both got 4. He's only got 2, but he was one of only 2 cars in the whole field to take 2 tires. It was him and Sean Castos. So all things considered, pretty impressive that he's sitting there in 3rd with that decision.
I think that combined with that wreck that checked up pretty much the entire field is what allowed for Nieto and King to break away so much. Ross Cato, of course, did a great job. He's actually building a gap over Andrew Freenage as well, back to the number 4 spot. Last lap by, he was a good 2/10, just over 2/10 quicker than the number 20 cars. So Ross Cato absolutely has got the pace here tonight. He is not ever faster than Kevin King and Angelo Phillip. They are, however, bump trapped with one another right now. Phillip had the chance to overtake King into turn 1. He opted against, though. He's trying to help Kevin King, though, so they can build a gap up and not be under threat by cars behind.
It's almost a mutually beneficial situation if they're able to continue to pull away. If they fight with each other currently, you're right, it's only going to give Cato more opportunities to close back in. He's certainly not losing any time. He's actually gained about 1/10 of a second the last couple times by. That's just how big the draft is at a track like this. And Andrew Freenage, a little bit quiet to start the night, started P6. He's 4th, and he's slowly creeping up on those intervals you see on the left-hand side of your screen, trying to catch up to those top 2 as we are a quarter of the way done with this Pocono 200.
This is complete. Phillip looked for the inside that time around. Opted out not to do anything, though. And this is going to get very, very interesting here to see how this race is going to now develop, because Ross Cato has been continuing to close them in. Last time by, King and Phillip both ran a 53.8. We'll compare this time around. 53.7s for the pair. Ross Cato, 53.4. 0.3 of a second quicker than the 2 in front of him, and that's because while Phillip is having to push Kevin King, Cato's just using the draft from the both of them to pull his way up.
Just let them do the heavy lifting for you, and that's how everyone's going to get closer together after a pretty spread out restart. Very different to the initial start of this race when on the drop of the green flag everybody was on top of each other and couldn't find some space. In this instance, it's going to be the draft that will allow them to group back up. We'll see how much so, though, because that first yellow of the night really kind of broke up what was some really great racing. Still plenty of opportunities to pass, but not that one massive lead pack like we had seen just prior to that yellow flag that came out on lap number 13. So instead of the top 2, it is the top 3 now pulling away. Cato solidly a part of that trio now. He's 0.4 of a second back in the number 3 position, and he continues to lurk there. And again, these 3 really don't have a ton to do right now, right? I don't think you're going to make a pass on Kevin King and run away from him. Again, there was that strategy element where, maybe working together was more beneficial than fighting against each other, but I wonder if it's maybe stalled out a little bit now that that additional car in Cato is joined. And here's some of the other packs, right? Doesn't mean that there's not good racing back in traffic. Kyle Trudell, the 7 car, going to make a pass on Bradley Burke for 8th, but he wants a 2-fer, trying to get Mills in P7 as well. Both the Battle Beaver and the 7 car twitch off at turn 3, and they're going to drag race down that long front stretch to turn 1.
We see one car trapped on the bottom side. That is Kyle Trudell, who lost a couple of positions on that front straightaway due to having nobody helping him out on the low side. Bradley Burke will pull clear from the top in his pursuit of Landon Mills in the number 7 spot. You see a couple of drivers fanning to the inside. Michael Lariah, I believe that was the 44, that had the jump down towards the bottom. We got mostly everybody, though, line astern, and this is where it gets difficult to pass, because while the racing is close, it is so difficult to try to make moves. And it reminds me a lot in the way of DRS draft trains that we often see in the FIA Formula One World Championship, wherein a lot of cars are on a very long straight. You'd think it should be easy, but when everybody's got the same drafting power that everybody else has, you can't really go anywhere with it.
That's the tricky thing, is you've got a great draft, but so does the car in front of you, and so does the car behind you. And when you step at a line, you get that wall of air, right? So, like, how can you make some meaningful progress? You just got to continue to be aggressive. only 3 drivers in the field did not take a time in qualifying, and I mentioned earlier that Landon Mills was one of them. He started 31st. He is now up to P7. That's a gain of 24 positions, and he is not done yet. The next victim is the TubeTech Chevy 51 of Tom Wetmore. 26th, though, got a little bit tight that time through the tunnel turn, lifted off, and look at that shot. Bradley Burke puts the bumper to Mills on the entrance to turn 3. It sends Mills up the hill. I was certain that that was going to ruin his corner in Nolan, but instead, it kind of forced him to diamond it a little bit, and he was just fine.
Just giving a little knock at the door, making sure that the door's still locked and if anybody's home. And, well, I think it's safe to say there was indeed somebody home as Bradley Burke able to hang on. Meanwhile, up in front, Ross Cato's now caught the top 2. So now at this point, there's no benefit to Agnew Phillip by trying to help Kevin King to push him away, because with all 3 of them in the mix here, they could very well start to be lost, these guys. At this point, the field behind them is matching their pace just about to the top 3. So how long is it going to be before Agnew Phillip, or even more importantly, Ross Cato decides to make a move here?
Cato is maybe the most impressive of all of this, right? I mean, I was certain that we were going to see big time struggles from, the strategy role per se, with the no tire stop and everything else that kind of shook up things up at the front of the field. And then again, quietly, Ross took 2, Sean took 2, Casto back in 12th now. Which I think is a little bit more of a more realistic strategy gamble. But it's been really good for Ross Cato, because 2 tires, he's just sitting right with these guys. I don't know how much of a long-term benefit there is to, say, saving that additional set of 2 lefts. I think the big gain is just the time gain by spending about 5.5 less seconds in the box than everybody else, and that's why Cato, second biggest mover, trailing only that of Mills at plus 15 spots. So it's been really impressive what the 12's been able to do, and you can see that trio is very steadily holding that 1.7, 1.8 second advantage back to that 20 car of Freenosh, who leads the battle for P4. That's been about the gap between those top 3 and everybody else for the last half a dozen laps.
And at this point in time, it doesn't look like things are going to be set to change anytime soon. I think the biggest point where it might be seen to change all of this is when we get down in the round to green flag pit stops. I do believe that that first caution came out at a late enough point that these drivers are still required to make at least one more stop throughout the course of this race. That said, I do believe once you hit about lap 32 to 35, we should be able to pit from there and be good to go to the end. So we're not too far away from that point where we would normally be expecting to see drivers thinking about coming on down for those initial green flag stops. We only require 1, of course, on the afternoon as well. Way to the inside of the background goes Carl Pooler. Where on earth is the 71 going? There's no draft down there for you.
Carl Pooler just giving us a demonstration of how wide the front straightaway is here, as he took it to the extreme way down there on his own. Didn't make the pass, though. Tucks back in line behind Mara. Those two in battle for about 18th and 19th position, as we see some separation now through the field and maybe a brief moment of calmness here at the Pocono Raceway after what has been a really exciting first half thus far. And again, just the way the draft plays out with this current package with these next-gen cup cars kind of gives me that plate race feel, right? Most of the time, if you're not at an Atlanta or a Daytona or a Talladega, you're kind of thinking, go for the race lead to make the pass, try to hold off, right? Like every lap, battling for the race lead is important. I don't know if I have that same sense of urgency out of the field here. I think more so the urgency is trying to get to the lead pack. Mills will go under the 51. No! But he cleared himself. Wetmore was still there. Mills came up. They both made contact. And the 26 gets the spot in the end. 51 not happy. Looks to send a message, but Tom Wetmore goofed his corner trying to deliver that message. He might have to deal with Burke looking to the inside. 95 thought about it, won't do it. But man, what an aggressive move from Landon Mills that seemingly came into nothing.
Landon Mills had that right rear just barely strike the safety barrier in the exit of turn number 2 as well, but looking like everything is all well and good. Not enough of a hit to actually cause any sort of damage. The real world likely would have been some scraped paint, but nothing more from there. You just saw Burke lose out on another spot to the likes of Tom Wetmore, who powers through for number 7 to the top shelf. Landon Mills, meanwhile, falling back to Cody Harris, tried for an offensive into turn 1. It didn't go his way. Burke, meanwhile, looking to push Wetmore up back to the bumper of that number 26 Battle Beaver Chevy Camaro. Mills with an almighty run coming to turn number 2. He's going to look to the inside of Harris.
He goes to the inside of Cody Harris. Landon Mills continues his march to the front. Make it another spot in favor of the 26, who is now up 26 positions from the start of this race. And Cody Harris had a decent run off of 3, but didn't even bother to try to cross it back over and take the spot back. He'll use the push. Here's another one down to the inside in turn 1. 3 spots in 3 laps as Landon Mills is at a race high P4.
Up to 4th place for Landon Mills, but now he's going to have to stall things out a little bit because he's got over a second now. Up to Ross Cato, almost 2 seconds now. Up to Ross Cato, Agno Phillip, and critically, Kevin King. Now, if he wants to get up there, he's going to have the rest of this field work with him here, coming on down turns 1 and up through 2. But the way they've been racing with each other right now, I don't think they're willing to really work together right now. They more tend to fight it out amongst themselves.
We've seen a lot of that over the course of this race so far, and a long way still to go. Has Mills' run kind of sputtered out, though, right? He's got now 1.6 seconds to the next closest car, which is Cato, still trailing that trio of 3. So, he's kind of expended what he can, and now is kind of the best of the rest, right? How do you close that gap without a yellow? Can he get there through pit cycles? Can he get there on sheer speed alone? I think it's doubtful just based on the draft factor. Is there you see King, Phillip, Cato whip by, and then there's Mills a little bit back. So just keep an eye on that number 4 interval on the left-hand side of your screen, right? 1.7, 1.6, 1.8 in that range. If he can creep down to the 5s, to the 4s, to the 3s, then I'll perk up. But I haven't seen, anybody be able to do that. Freynosh kind of got stuck in that same 1.6 to 1.8 ballpark. We'll see if Mills is going to be any more fortunate. It just seems doubtful unless your race leaders really start to wear out on the long run and kind of splinter apart of their trio in and of itself, because they hold strong as they go. Quick look to the inside, but it should be actually pretty easy work for Michael Araya, who you saw jump at the line. He makes a quick pass on Chris Treppa for P10 and 11. As you can see, those top 3 is still mighty tight, but Kevin King still leading. No major challenge for Agno Phillip since the restart.
And when you say that, it's looking like the top 3 are going to get themselves with the gap out. Last lap by, they were a good 2/10 slower than Landon Mills and Kill were. So the gap could potentially be shrinking here. As you can see, they're starting to split a bit further apart. Once again, 54.2s all around, but it's going to be about the same now for that secondary pack. And I think that is what is really, really important here. The second pack hasn't been falling back, but they haven't been gaining anything either. So at this point, they are just close enough that if something happens up here with these top 3, they're going to be right there and able to capitalize on every single mistake. As Phillip gets up and almost scrapes along the outside wall of the exit of turn number 2, will work back to turn 3. Once again, the top 3 splitting apart in a huge, huge way here. The Team Associated World Championships, Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 going to work his way up to the front end, and he's going to log in at 54.1 last time by. So finally, the gap does look like it's extending back out overall. It's these little fluctuations, though, that could potentially spell trouble for this bigger field. You see Ryan now looking to the bottom to get around Kyle Trudell in the turn 1.
Trying to get down to the inside of the 70, go on board with Lariah in P10. Not going to happen that time. He'll tuck in line and again, use the draft on the 7th and try to get to Trudell. But again, Trudell's drafted off of the car in front of him. So it's just tricky to build up those big runs. That's why you saw guys like Burke get such big runs on the first, second, third cars because they just didn't have as much draft to use as a defense mechanism. In midfield, everyone's drafted off of everybody. So it's tricky to differentiate yourself and do something that could really set yourself apart. So Mariah drops back. He has to hit the reset button and then try again. As that 7 to Trudell, not really worried about playing defense. He's trying to be on the offense and get around Burke up the road. That's just how it is. I swear every time we look at that front strut shot, somebody's going just unnecessarily down low to the inside without a battle associated for it. As Kato is starting to struggle just a little bit, dropping it back, and now here with the 34 car there, some side-by-side action in the pack. Fetter place, 22nd position, lap 37 in this race, was side-by-side with the 19 car and inside one out. So Stanford up to P22 and Fetter place down to P23. Kind of a tale of two different races for these two, right? Stanford didn't queue, started 32nd, so that's a good spot for him. Fetter place, though, Nolan started 8th, so that is not a good place for him. So very different races for those two.
Very different races for these two drivers as it stands, and it's these differences in races that does make it genuinely entertaining to watch. This type of racing here, it makes it very compelling to kind of watch, to see how everybody ebbs and flows and how everybody deals with these types of situations all the more differently the further your race gets along. Speaking of dealing with situations differently, Sam Mieta, by the way, might be out of contention for the race win, but certainly not out of the fight. He is still on the racetrack, albeit 5 laps down. So he's been running out there for the last little while, just kind of logging laps after having the huge right front damage to his machine when he got turned to the outside wall on the first lap after the restart. You just see him behind Michael Kuczynski, who himself is just in front of Kevin King, but he's looking at this point just kind of keep trucking and hope that maybe another lucky caution falls his way, as is Kuczynski, who sits in that lucky dog spot.
Here's the battle for that number 12 spot. Chris Treppa has had a lot of speed since starting mid-season here in the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series, but has made plenty of enemies along the way. That includes Sam Nieto, which he had made contact with earlier in this race. Treppa was running a little bit higher than he currently does when that contact happened. Now he finds himself trying to get around Michael Johnson, while also trying to not get past by Sean Casto. This trio, 11th, 12th, 13th. Another little group of 3 behind as Trevor really lost the race car that time in turn 2. And that car got loose. It was a great save. Could have been a lot worse, but it'll cost him. Casto gets by. And now the 24, Grant Davis, also wants to get by, but he recovers well, gets his feet underneath him in 3, and now gets right back on the gas.
Is this side-by-side, though, going to be just enough to keep him from closing back up, though, to Sean Casto up the road? That's the next big question. He's got to get this battle sorted with Davis and Click before they lose too much time to the drivers up in front. But Trevor's not willing to let this one go, but still chasing the car a little bit down in turn number 1. I think the tires may still be a bit overheated from that initial moment in turn 2, 1 lap ago. We'll see how he fares this time around. Still side-by-side with the Hasib Design Chevrolet to the bottom of turn number 2 at the tunnel turn. This time, Trevor backs out, not looking to take any unnecessary risks.
Not the objective at this point. However, 40 laps down, 40 laps to go this time by. And we get closer and closer to some really consequential decisions and who's going to end up winning this Pocono 200 in just a little bit time. Sam Nieto, Mike Kuczynski, the only drivers not on the lead lap. Nieto was involved in contact earlier in this race with Chris Treppa. He had to come down pit road. He got back out there. He's 5 laps down in 33rd. Mike Kuczynski 2 laps down in 32nd. Everybody else on the lead lap. No retirees so far in the opening 40 laps of this race. We got a pretty healthy field still going strong.
very healthy field still so far out here on the racetrack. Got 31 out of 33 on the lead lap, all 33 still on the racetrack. Not something we've seen too often here in this 2023 campaign for the Full Throttle Real Sim Racing Cup Series, but definitely a very welcome sight at that, to see so many drivers still in contention. Kyle Trudell will hit pit road. He is the first driver to come in for green flag pit stops. One lap past halfway. Jared Wymister follows suit.
So they'll come down pit road for service. They were both last in only 27 laps ago on the first yellow flag of the night. So do you wonder, is that a little bit early with 38 laps to go? Can they get there as that 9 car overshoots the box? It's going to be a bit of a time loss there for Winemaster, as that probably burned about 3 seconds, right? Can they split this gap, Nolan, go 33 laps or so to be able to do it on a one-stopper, or will we find out that that's out of the range for everybody else and it is going to be a two-stopper all the way around?
I think we should be able to make this a fairly easy one-stopper at this point, especially with the yellow flag that we had at about lap number 13. The fact that so many of these drivers came in and pitted then, I think we'll be pretty good to go. I think at this point, a lot of these drivers are just looking to run these tanks out empty before they come on down into pit road. I mean, you're not really losing a whole lot of time in comparison with everybody else. There's no reason to really push it all that much as Wymister and Trudell work their way back onto the racetrack. It's worth noting, obviously, Trudell and Wymister are going to have the pace on the tires, but with them pitting so much earlier than everybody else, it's going to be a big question now on, with all this time they're going to make up here in clean air, whether or not they can hang on to it when all of a sudden they're the ones with the oldest tires on the racetrack.
Those two cars who came in, 4 tires and fuel, no shock there for Trudell and Winemaster as they pull back out. But again, I'm kind of waiting for a big name to make a decision. 29 laps since they last pitted, 38 laps left to go in this race. Again, you want to wait for that laps run number and the laps to go number to about equal each other, and that's kind of your sign that you're going to be good to go to the end of the race. Keep in mind that, you know, some drivers will want to not set that target number as the last lap of this race because you're going to want fuel for overtime, but I don't know if I ever really subscribe to that too intently, Nolan, because in almost every circumstance, if you get that late yellow, you're going to want tires of some sort, especially if it's on a long run anyways. So, you know, I don't know how much I would modify my strategy to give myself some fuel to, you know, make me safe if we went to overtime, because I think you're probably just going to need tires if you go to overtime anyways. But we'll see as well if that's a factor in anybody trying to go a little bit longer, maybe on the early half, which is now. That way, you got a little bit more fuel than, say, you know, if I can go 30 laps on fuel, if I pit with 30 laps to go, I'm on my number. But if I pit with 25 to go, I get the bonus, right? We'll see if that affects anybody. Certainly, it's the opposite end of the spectrum for Trudell and Winemaster for pitting so early, but they seem to be the only ones that want to come in.
I think for them, they're still sticking to their original strategy of pitting around that lap 40 mark, and they haven't really adapted to the fact that you had that one yellow flag, which is going to make it, again, interesting to see how that's going to impact their race moving forward in this one. With now less than 40 laps left to go, we are a little ways at this point past halfway, and at this point, a lot of this field still has yet to pit for that second time, bar the 2 that we already saw come in. This does also, of course, include our 2 cars that are 1 lap down as well, with Michael Kuczynski and San Nieto, who, by the way, Kuczynski just went 2 laps down a little while ago. So now the 30 car down 2, and he's going to need now 2 cautions to work his way back to the lead lap. Not something at all that San Nieto was hoping for, as he was hoping that it would just be a very simple case of 1 car, then he's the only one a lap down, hopefully with some lucky drivers knocking themselves out of contention.
The draft has broken this field up into those kind of sub-segments, right? A group of 2 there, then a group of 3, then a group of 3, then 4, then 2, and so on and so forth. But again, now that the tires have really started to go, longest green flag run by double than what we saw in that first stint. These tires are more worn than they've been. Drivers can't really stay on the bumper as much because they're starting to push on exit. and that's why you're starting to see this separation. There's a good look with Brett Poncari on board his car on the big box, and then bottom right-hand corner of your screen, rocking the VR goggles as always. And I don't know if his camera is mirrored or if he's actually turning right through the corner. We'll see, but he's got the goggles on. It's such a unique and a fun way to take in the action. He's got a fun paint scheme as well, and yeah, he's definitely turning left. All right, he's doing all right as he rides in there. And as always, shout out to the merch on the back, shout out to the shirt. Brett's got a good looking setup and a good looking whip. Looking to get a good finish in this one, I think, is what he would like to walk away from this one with. P24 for the moment. Still some time for him to improve on that, though, as again, a cycle green flag pit service always presents opportunity.
You know, as soon as you mentioned he might be turning right or his camera's mirrored, my eyes immediately flicked to the Blue Jays pennant over there on the wall behind him, and I thought for a minute, I was like, if the right on that is backwards, that makes sense that it'd be mirrored. Otherwise, he has somehow found a way to engage reverse calibration on his wheel, which I'd argue is more impressive than anything else, as he seems still working at the number 21 spot.
He's got the Princess Peach design. You can do the inverted racing in Mario Kart. I know that, but
I don't think it's still inverse right to left, though.
Service. Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend it on the service.
Oh, you still turn the car left to right. It's the track itself that's rotated, which would a Pocono right turning be any different than what we're getting right now? This is the big question. We have a shorter stretch between turns 1 and 2, what would be turns 1 and 2, and the long pond straight all of a sudden becomes the second back stretch. I kind of like that idea. That made for some amazing dive bombs on the last lap into what's right now turn 1.
Because you'd have to woe it up way more with the lack of banking in 3 as opposed to down here in 1, which has got the most banking, and it seems like they're all trying to hit the fence every time they come out of the corner. But the way that safer barrier takes away some extra real estate, it wasn't all that long ago that not only was there not a safer barrier here, there wasn't even a catch fence between turns 1 and 2 here at Pocono for the longest time. There still ain't one in turn 2, but Casey Kane about took out some trees on that exit at turn number 1 not that long ago, so they finally put some fencing in on the Long Pond Straight. But yeah, Pocono be wild, and it's a big racetrack. I get it's expensive to add some of that stuff in, but again, with the safer barriers being added after, of course, the exterior walls and all of these tracks were built, it kind of feels like it jumps out at you sometimes on exit, and I think Phillip maybe brushed it on the exit of 1 that last time. So many drivers getting pretty close to the wall on exits of turns 1 and 2.
You mentioned that Casey Kane wreck, and if I'm remembering correctly, that was way back in the 2010 Cup Series season. It was either 2010 or 2011 when Casey Kane had that massive incident. I know I've just been informed it is 2010 by producer Joshua Lee, and I believe
he's a Casey
it was
Kane stand, so yeah, I trust him.
Yeah,
one of one.
And I would assume it would be put in about a couple years after, at the very most, because of that whole mess. And I look back at it from a few years ago. I didn't think anything about it now, but I mean, looking at it now with all the safety talks that have been going on all across motorsports, not just in NASCAR, right, within the last little while, it does create something very, very curious that you've been seeing how long it took them to put that in, when it's been pretty much industry standard at pretty much every single track there is. And you mentioned the fact that he almost hit the trees, and that's because he got onto the safer barrier, well, not safer barrier, the concrete wall, the exit of turn between turn numbers 1 and 2, and that kind of brings something else that I love about Pocono. You can see, especially on the front stretch down to turn 1, the track is more built into the ground on a hillside instead of above the ground, like most tracks are. I love that feel about the racetrack. It helps it feel so much more organic. It's a feel that most other NASCAR circuits just can't capture in the modern age.
You're being built into a lot of the terrain, makes it a unique racetrack. It's in such a beautiful part of the country. As we saw Kevin King pit, that was the first big move, and now here is the response. Phillip to pit road, smoke of the tires as Landon Mills, Wetmore, Burke, Lariah, Johnson, Casto, all also will come down to pit road. But the big question here is, with that 1 lap undercut as Cato cycles through to the race lead, is who will win the race off of pit road, Phillip or King? Kevin King in the box, 15.0. It was a 40.9 on pit road total. Let's monitor the numbers and see what we get out of Agnell Phillip. Service is complete, but it's slow. 15.4 in the box. What's that total going to be as he exits pit road? Agnell Phillip gets back out onto the racetrack, 41.2. So he was slower than King all throughout, and as he gets back up on track, there's no surprise there that Kevin King will significantly gap Agnell Phillip into what should cycle through to be the race lead, as now we see the 12 Ross Cato come down. A very impressive run for him, having only taken 2 tires on that first yellow to stick in the top 3 all the way. He is down pit road.
Nicholas Mara will be coming in as well from the number 16 spot, so he'll fire his way down to the pits as well. So Cato and Mara, 2 more drivers that have found themselves coming on in, while you've still got a lot of drivers looking to get themselves sorted further on. Kevin King has built up a substantial gap over Agnell Phillip with that pit stop call on the racetrack. Phillip has Trudell directly behind him as of right now, so Trudell can potentially give Phillip a bit of assistance in closing into Kevin King, who I believe would be the net race leader, if my math is factored out on this one correctly. Andrew Farinas will come to pit road, and that is Cody Harris right behind.
Wasn't as concerned about this being the case as the battle between Phillip and King, but it is worth noting that Cato also gets passed by both Phillip and King on the pit cycle, so Kevin King kind of got in front of any challenge by going for the undercut, getting the fresh tires sooner, and getting out in front. Still waiting on about maybe half a dozen or so cars to pit. It includes these 2 who are battling for the, I guess I should say for the 24 car, who is trying to defend for the race lead. He's going to get passed by Brian Dixon. Fresh tires, not for position. We're still waiting on Davis, Alexander Light, Carl Pooler, Brett Pancari, and Richard Woodruff to come down pit road, and then a bunch of cars at the back of the field still yet to pit in Kaczynski and Nieto. Also, Ryan Dunkelberger to the garage. His night is done. That one kind of came out of nowhere after he actually made contact on pit road during his scheduled green flag service, missed his box, and he has decided to park it, so his night is done.
Now that is an unusual incident, and honestly, Evan, looking at it again, I want to say possible hardware failure for Dunkelberger, as the car just turns dead right out of nowhere, hard into the pit wall, and he doesn't move for the longest time either. That is not something you've seen very much. I'd reckon either a wheel failure or potential screen failure is what cost them all of that time. And I can't exactly say I blame it. The hit was hard enough. It would have broken the car anyway, put it right back to where San Nieto was. But hey, that makes Nieto now second from the bottom. That's 1 more point at least for the number 2.
1 more on up to do some damage limitation, and I guess good news for everybody. Davis will stay out to lead 2 laps total. He will come down to pit road this time. Brett Pancari in second spot will also make the left-hand turn to pit road, which means that Kevin King will cycle back to the race lead and will try to set himself up for a 25-lap run to the end of this race, sitting on an advantage about 2 seconds over Agnell Phillip. And again, King not competing for the championship, but Nolan, there is no debate that he is one of the very best on the iRacing service, possibly trying to capture race win number 3 in the last 4 weeks.
Oh, absolutely, and it's it would be really something to see him try to take that race win once again. Kevin King has really put himself back into contention here, and he has made that car alive, and he has really taken it to the big names once again here in RSR. I'm trying to think. There was one season where Kevin King pretty much dominated the entire thing, and I'm thinking am I thinking 2020 or am I thinking 2021 on that one? It was a while ago, I know that much. Well, whatever the case, Kevin King continues to lead the way here in this one. As I mentioned, trying to take yet another bout of race win. This is going to be, I think, an interesting run then to see how this is all going to go down. And I can tell you right now, it's going to, I think, get even more intense, especially if another yellow flag comes up in these last 20 laps or so.
That's going to be the nail-biting part, right? These cars on fresh tires, again, they've got their bite back. Drivers can be aggressive if they can draft close to somebody, but the green flag pit cycle has done a very good job at spreading people out, and Kevin King hoping that Agano Phillip from 1.6 seconds back cannot catch enough draft from his wake to get back up to him. As we close in on the final 20 laps of this Pocono 200, let's take in the sights and sounds of the Pocono Raceway as we go RaceSpotTV fan immersion. Well, as the interval in the battle for the race lead grows, and Kevin King now enjoys a 2-second advantage over Agno Phillip, the battle is right here. The 95 of Bradley Burke scored P6. And you got Lariah, Harris, Wetmore, Trudell. They have all been dicing it up, Nolan. I think it's the best battle on track right now as we get closer and closer to the final 10.
I would find it hard to argue with the assessment on that one, as they have been duking it out left and right, side to side for a while now. You can see Bradley Bird really working the high lane, sacrificing so much on corner entry, but look at the overspeed that he gets on the exit of turn number 3. Now, that's something that I saw in another race I called back on Thursday night when they raced here at Pocono. A couple of drivers trying it out. It didn't typically work out all that well. But Burke seemed to have some sort of secret figured out in the number 95 Get Wet Sports 96 Chevrolet. Is just behind Burke. Lariah and Harris will work nose to tail. They're down to the bottom side. Tom Wetmore trying to stay in touch just behind in this overall fight for 6th through 9th. While even further behind, the fight for the first spot outside of the top 10. Sean Casto trying to fend off Michael Johnson. Johnson with a huge run coming off at turn number 3. Looking to get to the back of the Velocita.com Chevy. He's going to give a huge shot to the bumper.
Seen a couple of those tonight where instead of simply going for the move to the bottom, drivers are I think, almost trying to help each other. It's an aggressive shot, but square to the bumper on the straightaway, just trying to push and push along. 39 of Johnson could easily make the move, but then what? You're just going to get the 52 of Casto making the move back on you straight away later. So, you know, it's kind of a battle of trying to catch the next group if you can. The inspiration for Johnson and Casto is they're trying to catch Trudell. For this trio here, there isn't a ton for them to be able to get to, right? I mean, you've got Burke leading this pack. It's a whole 2 seconds to then the next group of 3, Mills, Freenosh, Cato, 5, 4, and 3. I just don't see them catching that group, but you can see them in the foreground of the shot there, right? How spaced out these groups are. Everybody would like to try to work together in theory to get to that next group, right? Don't fight within your 3. Try to get more positions for all of you to fight for, but I think anything outside of like 1.3 has just been a little bit too tricky to make up.
And I do think that is what makes it genuinely interesting to see how these races have gone along with one another and how these racers have had to have been so willing to work with one another in order to make these gaps close on it all that much easier. As you saw, Kyle Trudell just got swamped by Johnson and Casto a bit further in the background while Burke works at the top side. Lariah going with the 95. Might be looking to try to help out Bradley Burke on the top, but Cody Harris going to quickly shut that alliance down. Cuts in front of the Sim Speed Shop Chevrolet and hightails it down the front straightaway right after the 95. While up front, a huge look to the inside as Ross Cato looks to break the draft from Mills and Freenosh.
Trying to do what he can to get away. I just think it's going to be too tricky for Cato on the 4 tires, so no longer at the disadvantage of only having 2 like he did on the last run. Mills, again, biggest mover, up 27 spots. Cato, the second biggest, at plus 15. Injured Freenosh has been good, just hasn't been killer. And I think that's kind of a decent way to talk about the season for the 20 car, but I have learned to never sleep on Andrew Freenosh over the years. The winningest driver in series history, more champions than anybody else, so championships, I should say, than any other driver. If he's just hanging out, Buddy can just flip a switch in a week's time and absolutely take it to you. Right now, he's hoping for, at best, a P3 in this race. Maybe at worst, where he sits right now, a P5. Again, I just don't see the threat from behind Harris's group, 2 seconds off of the rear of this group of 3. It would have to be some sort of an issue for you to drop that far back.
Freenosh, you see him looking to apply the pressure to Landon Mills, trying to push into the back of Ross Cato so they can start to fight it out. for that third and final podium position. They are starting to run out of time here a little bit more, as we've got coming to 10 laps to go this time by. And with the gap only extending out to Kevin King up the road, at this point, I don't think these guys should worry about trying to catch up to Daniel Phillip. And in fact, they read the mind. Landon Mills looks to the inside of Ross Cato, will look to pick off the final podium spot down to turn one. Cato going to go to the outside line, try to set up a run on defense down the long pond straight. Mills going to just pull clear right up in front of the nose of the number 12.
Not the first time Landon Mills has done that exact move on that exact spot of the racetrack. I think it was Wetmore earlier in the race who was on the receiving end of it. This time the 12 of Cato, as the Battle Beaver Chevrolet of Landon Mills for the first time tonight on a green flag run is in a podium spot up to third.
Bit further back, the fight for 10th still raging on. Castle and Johnson are both broken by Trudell. And again, a big shot to the shorts for Sean Casto, as Michael Johnson trying to push him up towards Tom Wetmore. The crazy thing is, the strategy's working. They've been a 10th faster than Wetmore pretty consistently over the last several laps, and that gap is gradually closing. I just don't think it's closing quick enough.
Well, now the 12 car fights behind with Andrew Freenosh. Freenosh makes the move. The 12 has now slid down to the number 5 position, so dropping a couple of spots in the last few laps. But again, P5 at worst, P3 at best, assuming that you don't start racing too aggressively, that you take each other out of this race. They kind of snake low, snake high. Look at Harris, even though he's a full second and a half behind them, he's went low with them, trying to get every little bit of draft that they can. And Mills has actually pulled a little bit of a gap here with the 20 and the 12 fighting. It allowed him to almost sneak away. Don't think it's going to happen. However, that fighting, and not necessarily Mills pulling away, but more so Freenosh and Cato falling back from Mills, meant that Cody Harris got a lot closer, I think, than he was expected to be. He got to the 1.4 range on interval. That's a kind of about the line where I've seen the draft be effective. So Harris may have a shot in the dark at trying to get into that battle before the night's out, as the 39 of Johnson under the 52 of Sean Casto in the battle for P10. And he's got it for the time being off of 3.
7 laps left to go here in this, what is now, I believe you said, the 17th race overall in the season. I've lost count with how many weeks we've been on. This has been such an exciting season. You lose track of where you're at. I was honestly a bit surprised when he mentioned 4 races left in the regular season at the top of the broadcast. I was thinking, wait, really? Already? It's been incredible just how quickly this season has flown by. Time flies when you're having fun. And this race has just flown by as well, with Lariah and Brandenburg looking to do battle once again for P7. And Cody Harris in front of them, just running in no man's land.
Look how high up they are there. Is that 44 car only about a lane and change off of the wall, as he knew Burke was trying to go high on him. Neither of those drivers went anywhere near the bottom of turn 3, where I've seen most of the cars tonight. And again, they will simply just push down the backstretch. They are trying to get to Cody Harris. Cody Harris is trying to get to Ross Cato. There's always somebody trying to draft somebody else. That is kind of the story of this late run. Worth noting as well, Agnew Phillip has closed the gap ever so slightly on the race lead, but I don't think it's to a point at which Kevin King should be worried. The gap was as high as 2.0 seconds. It is down to 1.5, 1.6. But if I'm King, I'm not hitting the panic button yet. I think all in control for the 29 still, as we continue to watch this battle for the number 3 spot. Here comes Freenosh. Mills got loose. He'll go to the inside, and it will go side by side down the front straightaway, making the run to turn 1. Freenosh, half a car length advantage. Mills not going to back it out, though. He'll stay on the outside. Going to try to get the run off the corner. He just can't get the throttle not quick enough. Center, Freenosh clears for the moment. Mills with the counter attack, though. He'll go right back down to the inside.
An over-under like that is unusual. Usually the way Pocono works, you can carry enough momentum from the bottom that the guy on top isn't able to be able to mount a defensive back to the inside, but I think that proves just how much Andrew Freenosh kind of boxed cornered exit to allow for Landon Mills to get himself turned back down to the bottom. Although nothing will come out of it, he had to back out in turn 2, and he'll now fall back in line for turn number 3. 4 laps go this time by. Freenosh now holds that final podium position, but don't forget Ross Cato is still very much in the mix, and now he's got a choice. Does he want to try to go with Landon Mills if he goes side by side again, or does he try to work his way up to Andrew Freenosh? You see the 20 breaking the draft, using the IndyCar strategy of weaving back and forth across the straight as we rocket back down to turn 1.
We talked about it earlier. Not a jinx, simply a graphic that we referenced earlier, Nolan. 3 attempts at overtime if we have to go there. Kevin King wants to get to the white flag for this race to be official, and he will have yet another impressive win, having led so far 65 of the 77 laps that have been completed so far, looking to be the only driver to win multiple races from pole all season here in 2023. And again, King cannot qualify for the championship, for the playoffs. But what all these Kevin King race wins are doing, Nolan, is making sure that no new race winners take home checkered flags. Granted, P2 is Phillip, P3 is Freenosh. Those are drivers who are no stranger to winning races, as is anyways, but it's leaving those spots open on points, which when we talked about the playoff grid at the start of the night tonight was how a majority of the field appears to be qualifying their way into the postseason this year.
I think that is one thing that a lot of people do not take enough for granted when it comes to people that aren't that aren't qualified for a championship running up in the front like this. It does make it so that while you, again, as you mentioned rightly, while they're not able to punch their way in, they're very easily punching somebody else out by taking away valuable race wins, valuable points that they could otherwise be utilizing, and they're not able to because guys like Kevin King are just running away with it in the lead of these races. It makes it very, very tricky for the lower drivers to be able to work their way up, and it makes these midfield battles all the more important.
You can see the live standings at P16. It is grown. Nieto over Tucker. Wetmore, Papineau could have done benefit, I think, by a great night. It's not a bad night for Wetmore inside of the top 10, but again, you're going to need Nieto to have an off night if you're going to make up some of those points. And Sam Nieto right now in 32nd position. Big drop for him. This could be that swing is him dropping down to be the bubble driver. You can afford one, can't afford many more than that at this point in the season. Kevin King will take the white flag. This race is official. 1 lap to go at Pocono.
Kevin King going to work at turn numbers 1 and 2. He's got a whole host of lap traffic in him, including the fine for 27 between Papineau and Richard Wolsifer. But with the second place, Agno Phillips still 1.7 seconds behind to the line, he can just cruise back and let these guys fight it out. He has nothing to worry about with no competition behind.
Yeah, with a 1.7 second gap, I would back way away from this battle up front because these cars fighting for position. King not afraid, though, and he'll give a bump to Kaczynski and watch them fight it out in front of him. Behind, Phillip not going to be able to get close enough. Freenosh on his own for third. Cody Harris, a late pass on Cato. They fight for 5 and 6, but up front, it's race win number 3. Kevin King wins the Pocono 200.
Great drive by Kevin King. 3rd race win of the season. It is a shame that he is not able to contend in the championship because he very much would give Agno Phillip a massive run for his money. As we watch the last of the battle start to trickle across the line. How about Landon Mills? Didn't qualify, right? Was 1 of 3 that didn't make it. Started 31st, fought his way all the way through this field, and finished in 4th. As, oh, hello. trouble with cars crashed across the line. Chris Treppa backwards coming across the line. He got into San Nieto coming across things as they all ended up into each other. And I believe, in fact, Treppa may have done that a bit intentionally as Contador was out of fuel coming off of turn 4.
Yeah, I think it was Sam Nieto.
Oh, wow. Oh, he's angry.
We remember the contact from earlier in the race. Treppa got into Nieto.
Oh,
and then
boy.
it was the payback from the 2 car to put Treppa into the wall on the last lap of the race.
That's
and
not
then the issue for the 7 was an independent issue with Trudell running out of fuel and struggling to get across the line. So a little bit of late race dramatics and flair here at Pocono, but Kevin King was so fast he didn't see any of it all. He celebrates 3 wins in 4 weeks. What an impressive run for Kevin King. Well, let's take a look at your full race results tonight, brought to you again by our friends at Get Wet Sports. Kevin King takes home another win, this time to the tune of 0.8 of a second over Agnew Phillip. But again, the real number much bigger than that is he backed it down significantly on the final lap of the race. Freenosh comes home in third. We'll talk with all of them in a minute. Mills and Cato at the end of this one. So Ross Cato gets the spot back from Harris. They were side by side on the final corner. Harris just misses out on the top 5 with Lariah, Burke, Wetmore, and Johnson the top 10.
11th place going to be holding to the likes of Sean Casto with Grant Davis in 12th. Thomas George will find himself back in the number 13 spot. Andrew Phipps in 14th. Eric Stanford went from almost stone dead last in this field to finish up in 15th with Alexander Light in 16th. Jerry Wyminster 17th. Nicholas Marr was 18th. Steve Tucker and Carl Pooler will round out the top 20.
And we look back into the 20s. A couple of drivers here, started off better. Treppa was a P10 car at the start of the race. He ends up in 23rd, but not a huge amount of surprises. Most of the cars in here, kind of teens, 20s, just didn't have good nights. Of course, Federplay started at P8. He ends up in 30th, so it is a significant drop for the Bowie Esports car. And we talked about Sam Nieto, and we were looking at the live points. P32, not a good night for him. May just make his final few weeks of the season a little bit interesting. We'll wait on your race winner to finish celebrating and head on down, Nolan, so I'll toss things off to you first. Agnew Phillip was second tonight. You are with him.
Agnew Phillip going to be joining us up here from that number 2 spot on the podium. And Agnew, you started off on a fierce fight with Kevin King for the race lead. That went all the way down until you ended up working together right after that first caution to pull the gap out. And then unfortunately, it was a gap that only extended come the end of the pit cycle there. But overall, how would you rate the first half of this race for you?
The first half was all right. I thought we could kind of maintain a bit of a gap after that first cycle of pit stops there, and make it so that it was between me and him. And I roasted my tires, I think, a little bit at the beginning of the run, so and then it started coming back to me a little bit before we pitted. And then I don't know, I figured with the one lap pressure tires, even if he broke my draft, I'd be able to kind of get back up to him. But he did a good job kind of pushing, I think, at the beginning of that run and making sure I never got kind of within his draft, and just couldn't quite break that bubble and get close enough to where the draft would help pull me up there, and then we could potentially fight it out there. But I mean, Kevin is a hard guy to beat regardless. There's not a ton you can do when he's on it like he was today. So overall, pretty happy with how that ended up.
Obviously, Kevin King has now matched you for wins on the season. You both have 3. What do you think you're going to have to do in 2 weeks come Michigan to be able to see if you can't keep that number in front to number 4?
Well, I won't be at the Michigan race, so I don't know that I won't be able to do that. I mean, I'll be honest, if Kevin keeps showing up, the task of winning gets infinitely harder. I mean, this is what last year looked like for most of it. So, and he's gotten better since last year, and I've gotten better too. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be tough to beat him. I guess I'm kind of, in some ways, thankful that he's ineligible for the playoffs, because that would be make it a tougher task. But also, I mean, the competition's been great. I think the last few weeks, I think coming down to the key stretch of the season, it's just kind of helping hone some areas to try and make sure that come playoff time, we're performing at the best that we can. So, we'll see what we can do. I have no doubt Kevin's going to surpass my win total here in pretty short order if he keeps running these, but we'll give him the best run we can.
Obviously, you mentioned you weren't going to be here at Michigan in 2 weeks. You are, of course, fully locked in to the playoffs. I think that's a bit of an understatement right now, with 3 wins under your belt so far and having run almost every single race of the season. Are you kind of just taking things easy now as we get set to roll through the rest of August?
Yeah, I mean, I think the summer, it's just a little harder to find the time to practice with some of the other commitments going on, both on the sim, with Road to Pro and just in life. So, I didn't get, come playoff time, I'll have a lot more time to really devote to making sure I'm fully, tuned into every track. And that's kind of a different beast come then, because, things will start to clear up a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, right now I think it's just, seeing kind of how these different things play out. I was caught a bit by surprise by how that whole pit cycle worked out, not being able to kind of work back up to Kevin with the slightly fresher tires, and that's something that'll go into the memory bank for the future. There's other things that we've learned through these various races that'll be helpful. I think every race is a learning opportunity. So I'm going to keep plugging away, keep trying to get the best finishes possible. I think I'm trying to have a really good season from a statistical standpoint, trying to see if I can give, I don't think I'll be able to get up to some of Andrew's best seasons in the league, but trying to have one of the better league seasons. So we'll keep plugging away at it, and we'll see what the chips fall once playoff time comes. But I feel pretty confident. I mean, frankly, I'm running better now than I was last year at this time, and we all know kind of how last year turned out at the end. So hopefully we can kind of keep if we can build from here to the end like we did last year, I think I'll be in pretty good shape from the end of the season.
Well, we will wish you the best of luck then going forward. We'll hopefully be seeing you here in about, I guess it'll be 4 weeks then from now, as we'll be coming out, I guess, next chance to see what would be at Watkins Glen International on August 21st. But for now, thank you for joining us up here tonight. Congratulations once again on that hard-earned second place tonight. We'll let you get going here.
All right, thanks, Noel.
As I'll fill up in his A51 Pro Chevrolet. We'll move on down to the third place finisher tonight. It is the one that started 6th. He found his way onto the podium, but it was not without help. Andrew Freenage will find himself sitting in third. And Andrew, you were working with Landon Mills throughout a good chunk of that final run to catch up and overtake Ross Cato. Kind of walk us through how you ended up working out there with the number 26.
Yeah, kind of just circumstance. Didn't plan on working with anybody. I didn't realize the draft was going to be that big of a deal. So you just kind of worked with who you had. A little disappointed we had to fight there. I think we may have had a chance to catch Agnell, but with fighting for that 5-6 laps, it kind of just put us where it was. I thought we had better tires, and it was just hard to pass without having help there.
Obviously, it was a very different Pocono race than what we're used to, and of course, you mentioned rightly the draft was so much heavier tonight than it was in general. How does that make this race differ from seasons past?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember years past that. I remember me and Dylan Jones were 6-7 seconds in front of everybody racing. We're sliding around a little bit, and it's just a shame. I really don't like this car when it comes to that. You need help to do anything. Who knows if Agnell was faster than Kevin? You're just not going to pass anybody without help, and they kind of separated themselves. So, it's a little bit of a speedway race with a short track. You can drive away from people, but in order to pass, you kind of just need some help. So it's a little disappointing to see the car like that, but that's how it is. Everybody drives the same car, so yeah, that's kind of how it was.
And obviously, when we get set to go racing 2 weeks from now at Michigan, it is another very much draft-heavy circuit. What do you think you're going to have to do to keep that 20 car in the podium when we get set to go racing back to the Great North?
Yeah, I will not be running that. We'll see if my schedule allows me to join you guys in the booth. Plan on doing a lot more stuff in the booth this year. Things have just come up dealing with personal stuff. So just happy to get out here on Monday and race, honestly. Want to get back up in the booth, but I really don't have much interest in running the draft-heavy tracks. Be a lot of fun to watch, though. I'm sure everybody will be on top of each other. You see 3-4 wide. It's going to be a fun race, but I don't have any interest in driving that. So I'm sure these guys will put on a great show for you guys, though.
Well, fair enough. To each their own, and obviously, Andrew, we'll wish you the best of luck then when we see you out racing next time, whenever that may happen to be. For now, though, congratulations on a podium finish here from the Keystone State.
Thanks so much, guys.
As Andrew Freenos joining us up here from the number 3 spot on the podium. And that will now take us back to the race leader, Kevin King, the man that had to work for it in the first half, drove away with it in the second half. Evan, I'll pass it back to you for Kevin King.
He leads a nice 69 laps by the time this one is said and done, and Kevin King is yet again a Monday night race winner in the Full Throttle Real Sim Racing Cup Series. Kevin, congrats on this one. Kind of a tale of two, right? In the first half, you're fighting hard with Agnell and with Andrew, and then finally able to kind of break out the long green flag run and then the pit cycle to get some separation. Just talk us through your night.
Yeah, I was hoping to get some long green flag runs just to kind of see how everything was working out. And, we had green flag pit stops, which was awesome. Great job to everyone doing that. But it was saving fuel the first stint. And, the second stint, not so much. It was just kind of maintaining track position and not really knowing what was going to happen. It was like a 3-car breakaway. We were doing really well, just kind of maintaining the gap. And then I saw the guys behind slowly catching us, and I was like, man, it's going to be like a huge gap or a huge group of cars now. And then they start to slowly fade away. And then when that happened, Kato and Agnell started to fade away too. And I was like, well, this is weird. So I wasn't expecting that. And then from there, I knew if I had pit one lap earlier, I would have a pretty good advantage, especially with drafts if I came out by myself. And thankfully it worked out. Gives me some information for the Coke stuff, just knowing, not that we'll go green ever, but if we do, I'll know that, one lap might be advantageous, kind of jump some people. So I had a blast. I really appreciate everyone keeping it clean for the most part. I think it was a really good race. I learned a ton, so I definitely appreciate all those guys for helping with that.
It seemed like when you had those big packs early on, where before the first yellow, even at lap 13, there were more opportunities to pass than maybe people were actually attempting it up front. It almost looked like instead of passing a guy just to then get passed back, people were kind of slam drafted and bump drafted on the straightaways to try to kind of get their group of 2 or 3 up to the next group. Just how important was that draft and maybe some of the gamesmanship, including in your pack up front?
The draft is huge. You could be, 2/10 a lot faster to guy and go for a pass on the low side and not necessarily clear the guys on the outside, and you will get trained by whoever's up there. So I think a lot of those guys knew that if they weren't going to be able to be clear, it didn't make sense to kind of just throw it in there and side draft someone behind, because if anything, the guy behind on the inside is losing a ton of spots. So a lot of it was a lot like super speedway racing, where you just position yourself in the right spot and then you took a spot if you could. You didn't really push anything. You waited for someone else to try to make a run and maybe not complete the pass, because then you knew, that's a free spot. And so I think a lot of guys just were really patient with that, knowing they were in a good spot on the track position wise, and didn't really push anything and kind of let the race come to them. So that was, I think a lot of us kind of knew that's what was going to happen, even if you can get those big runs. But again, if you didn't have the help, if you didn't have like the for sure pace or passing opportunity, it didn't make any sense at all to even make those moves. So thankfully I didn't have to worry about that too much, but I definitely have been in that situation where I thought about it and it didn't work out. So something we've learned for the Coke race in a couple of weeks. I think you'll see a lot of people making those moves regardless in a couple of weeks, but I think you'll see a lot of people kind of just relaxing and taking what they can and just trying to jump those people that do make those moves.
When you talk about trying to translate some of the lessons learned here on Mondays into the Tuesdays, Kevin, fixed setups here. Obviously, you guys have more flexibility for most of those weeks on the Tuesday night races. What can you pull out of a race like this when you can't really, fine tune things as much to your driving style as you can up in the big leagues?
Well, the good thing for this one is, oddly enough, it's our last fixed race. So we'll be racing the exact same setup as this. So a lot of us this last week ran as much as we could on the fixed setup, NIS and just fixed racing, and as many leagues as we could. And so we, for a lot of us who are in the Coke Series, we do use this particular one a lot just because it's going to be what we're racing. But let's say if it was open race, I still think you get a lot out of it, because the passing opportunities, the line selection, how hard you go during a run, how the draft affects you, the arrow push, all that stuff still applies regardless if it's a fixed setup or an open setup. So I think for a lot of us, just knowing how the car drove was one thing, but really just how the car was being affected by others around them, and just kind of how a race played out. You took 2 tires, you took new tires, you filled it up, you pit a certain time. Like, there's all these different strategies that you would still do regardless of the setup that you had. So it's I'd say it's an easy track. It's only 3 corners, supposedly. That's what they say. I don't know. I think there's more than that, but whatever. But it's very technical too, because you have to know how to enter, how to get on the throttle, how to exit, how to maintain throttle through a corner while you're behind someone. So it's not very simple in the fact to go fast. So just knowing how to race in the pack of people that you're going to be around, and knowing what that pack does around you, in front of you, and guys behind, all that fun stuff, it's going to be very interesting to see how that race plays out. I'm excited for it because it's one less week and a half that I have to just work on just creating setups and driving laps. So it's nice. So I get all the testing out of the way. So I feel good about it. So hopefully we put on a good show.
Looking forward to catching that one, and also looking forward to any other races we can catch you here on a Monday night. Kevin, we'll let you get out of here. I know it was a long, hard fought one. Before we do those sponsors and shout outs, all those good folks, who makes it happen for you?
Yeah, all the guys at JRM. I know I'm running a little different number here, but it's back to my old number because just the way the league works, and I appreciate that. Ledford Billiard Supply, appreciate Cameron for everything he does. Put Team Associated in the car. That's my real life RC car sponsorship. Reedy, DMP, old school throwback. All the guys on the team, Landon for being such a trooper and helping me take picks all the time. For you for coming back from your amazing vacation, saw all your cool picks. I hope you had fun, and I appreciate all the guys in the league. I really love racing here. It reminds me of my old league back in 2003 era, where I could just run a really good race and just have fun and learn a lot. And this group really allows me to do that. So I really appreciate that. And all the guys who watch and cheer for us and all that fun stuff, you guys do a great job. So thank you.
Appreciate you putting on a show here on a Monday night. I think kind of the most enjoyable part of doing these is being able to see some of the top talent, Kevin. So appreciate you being here. Congratulations on the win. Best of luck tomorrow night as well, and we'll catch you next time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
He's your race winner tonight in the Pocono 200, Kevin King, a 3-time race winner here so far in 2023, and seemingly a number that may continue to grow, Nolan, as things continue on. To the point that I had just made, Kevin King in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, the likes of Agnew Phillip and so many other on the Road to Pro ladder, and people who have competed in that top level in the past, the present, and likely the future. Racing here on Monday nights makes things exciting, but you got to feel for Agnew, because it is tough to beat Kevin King, who is literally one of the very best on the surface. They were toe-to-toe at the start, and then when we got that long green flag run, Kevin was able to get that separation.
He very much was, and I think as Freenach was rightfully mentioning, the draft had a huge hand to play in that. Once you come down to pit road, you lose all of that draft, and all of a sudden it becomes who can get in first and who can get out first. And in that regard, Kevin King absolutely took the cake, was able to walk a gap out where the draft didn't matter, and it was just a walk in the park from there. So that's what nets Kevin King the race win here tonight. The question is, though, can you follow that up with win number 4 here in a few weeks?
Well, here's our last slowdown of the season. It's the last time we take things a little slow. We have an off week, we have one race, and then an off week. So there's only one race over the course of the next 3 weeks. That race is in the Brooklyn Hills of Brooklyn, Michigan, the Irish Hills, I should say, one of the couple of NASCAR Cup Series racetracks that I have been to. MIS, a beautiful facility, and it is a unique 2-mile D-shaped oval, soon to be unfortunately maybe one of the only 2-mile D-shaped ovals on the calendar. It's more high speeds, drafting going to be a factor in that one as well, but One, you thought 4 races left to go. Nolan was a surprise third to last race of the regular season when we head to Michigan in 2 weeks.
It's going to no doubt be a thrilling race. Michigan International Speedway, much like its sister 2-mile D Oval, the Auto Club Speedway, well, I guess not so much anymore, but at least on the surface it still very much is. It will provide, no doubt, a thrilling show from start to finish. It so frequently does. Michigan remains one of my favorite tracks to call on the iRacing service, just for how unbelievably thrilling all of the racing can be, with sometimes in slower cars hitting speeds higher than you can get at Daytona and Talladega.
And we look forward to you tuning in for that one. But until then, that is it for us here tonight from Pocono. On behalf of our entire team at RealSimRacing, for our partners at Get Wet Sports, and everybody else involved behind the scenes at RaceSpotTV, for our producer Joshua Lee, for Nolan Rempel, and myself, Evan Pasoko, want to say thanks for tuning in, and congratulations go to Kevin King, 3X race winner on 2023. The road to the playoffs gets one step closer when we go racing again in 2 weeks' time for iRacing's virtual Michigan International Speedway. That one on Monday, August the 7th. That race and every race of the Full Throttle Real Sim Racing Cup Series can be found exclusively here on RaceSpotTV. Till next time, good night from Pocono.